And you're all really, really, really welcome. We're so delighted to be back again. We hope you're having a great conference. It's a slightly more relaxed conference for us this year than it has been for the last couple. Oh, what was that? Oh, this is like the cinema. Can we have one of those things that says, turn your phone off? It's a bit more relaxed this year than it has been in the past, because last year, as you know, we had a major and historic decision at Labour Party conference which voted to support PR. So well done all of us and well done all of you, and particularly well done to you in the constituency Labour parties who have taken motions through your CLPs for the last 2 years. You're the absolute foundation and the backbone of this whole campaign, and we would not be where we are without the CLPs. So if you're in a CLP which passed a policy motion, we are eternally grateful, and you should give yourselves a round of applause. We're also really grateful to our trade union partners. We would not have had the historic win that we had last year without 2/3 of Labour's affiliated trade unions now backing electoral reform. We are particularly grateful, and they're going to be joining us to have the support this evening of ASLEF and the Musicians Union, and both their general secretaries are going to join us. So thank you to them, but also to all of the trade unions and trade unionists who we've worked with through Politics for the Many, and we've got some brilliant trade union speakers this evening. We're obviously grateful if any of you were National Policy Forum reps. Yay! At least one lived. 2, 3, well done. We're really grateful to you, because having got the conference vote last year, it was really important to us that we then had the discussion in the National Policy Forum. For the first time, the party has now made an unequivocal condemnation of the current electoral system, which it has said is contributing to alienation and distrust. And as far as we're concerned, well, we're now going to have to do something about it. But that was a really, really big step forward. So thank you to you for sticking at it. There were interesting discussions in the policy forum, but in the end, this was backed by the whole party. So we've made massive, massive strides forward. And really this year is a bit of a celebration of that. And it's just a reminder to the rest of the party that we are still here. Oh, there's this bloke from Hayes and Harlington. He turns up everywhere. Anyway, and he always turns up out of time as well. But somehow we forgive him every year. We have a stalwart group of MPs who support PR. We know the demands on your time are many, so we're really, really grateful that you've made it here. And we have some PPCs as well. And good for you if you're a prospective parliamentary candidate for turning up, and we'll be delighted to hear from you, and even more enthusiastic about getting you elected if you're pro-PR. So thank you to you all again for turning up. As I say, it's going to be a seamless event. At some point, I have a co-host arriving. I think he's probably just waiting for his bus or his train, but he is on the way. Oh, hello, and welcome. You can absolutely, wherever you like, you can come up here if you do a better job than me. Excellent. So we have another co-host arriving, you'll be relieved to hear at this point in the evening. But I want to just welcome, first of all, our first speaker, who is one of those stalwart MPs, has supported us through all of our campaigning. She's got a passionate commitment to social justice. She's a hugely eloquent speaker. I've also been in a meeting with her and her team, and almost the best thing I could say about this MP is just how absolutely lovely they are. It's really a pleasure to work with them. It's so lovely to be with an MP who treats their staff with respect and with dignity, and that's the way that she treats everybody. And we're really, really, really pleased that our rally is going to be opened this evening by Nadia Whittome, the MP for Nottingham East. Nearly got the wrong Nottingham.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm one of the people who has to dash to the Open Labour rally, and I've just come from the Socialist Campaign Group rally. Luke, I didn't have to also fit in the Labour to Win rally, so I guess that was one less. Like you, I didn't get a spot at that either. Now, I'm here talking as someone who benefits from first past the post. Nottingham East has been a so-called safe Labour seat for over 3 decades now, but I support proportional representation because I'm sick of communities like ours being ignored by an electoral system that doesn't give our voices equal value. My constituency is young, diverse, it's one of the most deprived constituencies in the country, but because we're not a marginal seat, the government can get away with not caring. First past the post, as everyone here knows, hands disproportionate power to a small number of voters while disenfranchising swathes of the country. So, for example, if you're a renter who has to skip meals, is working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over your head, tough luck. The maths doesn't add up in your favour. Those people are concentrated in safe seats. The government doesn't have to care. But if 495 car owners in Uxbridge are convinced that ULEZ is a bad idea, then that leads to the governing party scrapping their climate commitments and turning our very survival into a culture war. And as a result of that, young people, people of colour, low-paid workers, but in fact all of us end up being overlooked and losing trust in politics, and it's up to Labour to restore that trust. I think proportional representation should be just one part of a broader vision for democratic revival. There's so much more that we need to do to fix our broken democratic system. We should be scrapping restrictions on the right to strike and the right to protest, abolishing the unelected House of Lords, giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote, and every resident in this country, no matter their nationality. If you live here, you should be able to vote here. And we need to start tackling vested interests in politics, starting with banning MPs' second jobs. So, changing our voting system is just one step. I'm not going to pretend that it's a silver bullet, but it's a necessary step. If we can't even have a voting system where everybody's vote counts equally, then how can we begin to reform the rest of our democracy? So we need to change our voting system. We need to make sure that no constituency is left behind, that no community is taken for granted or dismissed as unwinnable. And when we win the next general election, we need to make sure that this is the last election that is fought under this absurd electoral system and replace it with one where every vote is equal.
Thank you so much, Nadia. And our next speaker, he's on the National Executive Committee. We're really delighted to be joined this evening by Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone. It's good to be back. It feels a little bit anticlimactic because last year was like the eve of the big vote and then we got the win. But actually, what happened on conference floor this afternoon was the sealing the deal on the win. The thing that really matters in the Labour Party's policy-making process is the vote that happens on the MPF reports at the end of the 4-year cycle, because that becomes the party programme from which the manifesto is then drawn. And the achievement of having a grassroots campaign on a single issue, uniting people from all kinds of different strands of opinion within the party around this thing, that issue of democracy that we agree on, getting that actually into the party programme, a condemnation of the way in which first past the post alienates people, that is an amazing historic achievement, and that happened at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And actually, it was incredibly difficult and an amazing organisational achievement of all the groups in this room to first off to win the constituency section the year before last, and then to go even further and get the unions on board and go through all their quite arcane internal processes to get enough big unions on board to win the whole conference. But actually getting a consensus at the MPF around wording that everyone was able to buy into, don't diminish that achievement at all. That was incredibly impressive, and it feels like it's been for some of us a very long march. I mean, John, I know, has been involved in this cause for even more decades, and Mary was involved in this cause, and when I was a young student in Bristol, kind of persuaded me to join LCER as I think as an 18-year-old. I'm not 18 anymore. Sadly, I kind of enjoyed being 18. But 52 is fine, and I hope that other political issues that I fight on won't take 34 years or whatever to get into the party programme. But people just kept plugging away because it was the right thing to do. And I think there are still some people in the Labour Party, some of whom are my best friends and allies on other issues, who think this is just like, some kind of funny issue that is being pushed because while we're in opposition, it's because we're miserabilists. Right? I'm the last bloody person to be a miserabilist. I believe in winning elections under whatever system is in front of us, but I believe in fairness as well, and that we should have a decent, fair electoral system. But I think there's that perception amongst the people that don't agree with us that it'll just kind of quietly go away, that it'll just sort of fade away if we win the general election. Well, no, fairness and equality and democracy don't fade away. They're not the injustice that is done to people whose votes don't count for as much if they're not in marginal seats. That's not going to suddenly disappear. It's going to be there until we tackle it and get an electoral system fit for this century, rather than one that seems to be based on sort of medieval principles of drawing funny lines on the map. And I'll come back to something I said previous years. The bottom line for me is that my approach to any political issue should be based on my values as a social democrat, as a democratic socialist. I should look at any policy that I'm going to pursue, whether it's economic or social or foreign policy or anything else, and think, does this bring about justice? Does it make people more equal? Does it give them their rights? Does it ensure that we have a fairer society? And you cannot justify first past the post when you measure it against any of those social democratic and democratic socialist values. It is not fair, it's not democratic, it doesn't treat people equally. And until we get that equity, that injustice will still be there and we will still be fighting. But my goodness, we are in a far stronger position than I ever dreamt was possible a few years ago. And testament to all of the people in this room that have organised so hard. I think you're the single best textbook example of how to get a policy through the Labour Party's democratic structures against kicking and screaming resistance, and you got there and you did it, and now it's in the party programme.
Thank you so much, Luke. And I mean, Luke really is a student of the party. So when he says that this is, quite a unique campaign, I think that's true. Our co-host for the evening has also said that, and when he's here, I'm sure he'll repeat it. We believe in votes for all, but we also believe in seats for all. So if the people on the steps want to find a seat, you are very welcome. This is not some sort of first-past-the-post seating thing when some of you don't count. No, some of you are stubbornly sitting on the stairs. Okay, we are really pleased to have some of our prospective parliamentary candidates here. These are people who've got to win so that we get a government. We'd really want them to win. We'd like some new people to be in the Labour Party. And I'm really delighted that the first one that we've got this evening, and good on you for coming, is the PPC for Milton Keynes South, Chris Curtis.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So yes, I'm standing to be the next parliamentary candidate. I am the parliamentary candidate standing to be the next MP for Milton Keynes North. And look, I'm standing to be an MP for the Labour Party, and I'm a parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party because I care about fairness and because I care about equality. And I tell you what, as an MP, as a parliamentary candidate, as a member of the Labour Party, I can't stand by when we have a voting system that is neither fair nor equal. And I'm proud to be supporting the people in the Labour Party campaigning for a change to our voting system. Now, before I was a parliamentary candidate, I was, for my sins, a pollster, which means that I've spent a lot of my life talking to voters right across the country. And the theme that has come through in most of the work that I've done is a level of frustration at how people no longer think that they can achieve change through our voting system. Now, there are lots of things that we as a party, and hopefully if we win next year, we as a government are going to need to do to change that. I think Keir has spoken a lot about the kind of changes that we need. For example, putting power back into communities, beefing up local government so we can have changes closer to people across this country. But ultimately, when most people think that our political system is broken, when most people think that our political system can't change their lives, I can't tell them that they're wrong when most people's votes in this country do not count. I tell you what, when disproportionately it is young people, it is black voters, and it is renters whose votes that don't count, I cannot see a situation where I can support a voting system that puts in place those priorities. I'll finish, we've only got a couple of minutes, but I'll finish with 2 points that I really cannot stand when I hear opponents of changing our voting system putting them forward. The first is that there are other issues that are more important, because of course there are other issues that are more important than our voting system. But ultimately, those decisions on other issues are impacted by our voting system. I absolutely guarantee you that there were civil servants, ministers, possibly even secretaries of state who were sitting in Whitehall in recent weeks drawing up this list of transport projects across the country that they were going to use to get rid of High Speed 2. And I guarantee you that they weren't thinking, is this the best value for money for the taxpayer? Is this going to be the thing that transforms people's lives? Is this going to be the thing that gets economic growth for this country? They weren't thinking about those things. They were thinking far more about whether this was the kind of thing that would win them votes in marginal seats. And that's an impact of our voting system that leads to real-world political consequences. So we need to change our voting system to make sure that we get all of those far more important issues right. And the other issue that the other argument that I hear a lot of that I can't stand is this idea that if we change our voting system, it's going to let the hard right in. 2 words, Suella Braverman. We heard her speech. We heard her speech at Tory party conference last week. Our first past the post voting system hasn't just let the hard right in, it has given them ministerial boxes and ministerial cars and has meant there haven't been people there to check their power. So yes, we need a change of our voting system. And as a candidate for the Labour Party, as somebody who stands for fairness and equality, I will always be a supporter of changing our voting system to the one that is far more fair, far more equitable, far more democratic, and far more going to change our country for the better. Thank you.
Brilliant. I got to apologise, that was Milton Keynes North, not South. Anyway, if any of you can help him get elected, please do. As I said at the beginning of the evening, we're really, really delighted to have the support of trade unionists from across the UK, from across all of our affiliated trade unions in the Labour Party. We're particularly delighted that we've had the support of ASLEF, who've helped us also put this event on this evening. We are really, really honoured, because this guy is quite busy, and there's a little bit of stuff going on the railways. We are really, really, really pleased to have the General Secretary, and I just would like to say, I'm sure on behalf of us all, solidarity to you and your workers, ordinary men and women who are fighting for their rights as workers, which we support, and fighting for us to have services that we need, which are run in the benefit of all of us and not a minority of shareholders. You've been really courageous. We are all with you, and thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you. You're all so kind. Well, that candidate for Milton Keynes South or whatever, he had no notes. There we go. Now I'm in trouble. Look, we know the problems that we've got as a society. Ran a campaign internally in my own trade union, put my photograph, said I want less people that look like me. And if we go for PR, that's what we get with devolved governments. We get more representation, better gender balance, more people in the community standing up for each other, more people from those communities voting for each other. We actually get a view of the world that's representative of the world in which we live in. I'm quite proud to be a middle-aged white bloke. But we've got enough of them. And at the same time, we stand up and we talk about the dog whistle politics of Suella Braverman. I almost found myself agreeing with Priti Patel the other day. It was quite frightening. Because she called her out. But again, if we want to take away the right wing, if we want to take away the ability from the imbalances that allows those people to take part in our system, but win the places they shouldn't have. We need to go to a system that works for everybody. We need a system that delivers for everybody. And look, let's look at our cultures. Our young kids can no longer afford to live or work where they grew up. So they go to the major conurbations. We don't have a problem with the major conurbations. We can get hundreds of thousands of majorities in the major conurbations. Of course then, in all the other places, we're not representative. We can't win the seats we need. We can't deliver for the councils. We can't deliver for the people in those areas because the majorities that we have aren't in the right place. So it's not just logistical, it's mathematical. And it's quite simple. Why should we be afraid of change? There is no reason. If we believe in what we say and we believe in what we do, then we should be able to come under any form of scrutiny by any political system that suits the people that live within it. So quite simply, I'm proud to be here tonight. I'm proud to be here to support PR. But I'm also proud to say I wasn't always a convert. Because this white middle-aged bloke, he gets elected by first past the post. And I'll probably get complaints from my own trade union. Well, if it's good enough for the wider society, if it's good enough for the people that we want to elect in our council to be our MPs, if it's good enough, why don't we do it in our trade union? And maybe we'll have to ask ourselves that question. Or maybe my members will ask me that question. And when we do, we'll ask them what they want. Because quite simply, isn't this about what people in their communities and people in the UK want as their system of delivery for the people they elect? The greater accountability that comes with it. The actual fact that rather than the situation we've got now where the gerrymandering of the boundary changes with the dog whistle politics of ID, voter ID and forcing things away, we know where they have PR around the world, more people vote because they believe their vote counts. And if we want people to engage in our democracy, if we want people to be part of our democracy, then every one of those people should feel wanted and guarantee that there's some value in the vote that they have. So quite simply, on behalf of ASLEF, I'm incredibly pleased to be here tonight, but it's time for change, it's time for PR.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Greatly in demand. Thank you so much, John McDonnell.
Thanks a lot, thanks. I just very briefly, I just want to talk about two things really, very briefly. One process and one, a bit of a confession really. On process, it is what Luke was saying, it's a huge achievement getting the commitment in the programme today. But the next stage is the Clause 5 meeting, which most of you know about. It's the meeting whereby the NEC comes together with the Shadow Cabinet and literally there is a line-by-line examination and agreement to the next manifesto. That's the next stage. It's absolutely key. And Mick's been here with me. We've been through a couple of these. And literally, you sit down in the room, you're locked in the room, you get the draft manifesto in front of you, and you go through it line by line, word by word. What we've got to do, and the manifesto is not always necessarily drafted from the totality of the programme. It's a selection from the programme. And what we've got to do now is move on to that next stage. Having reached this plateau, we need to go to the next plateau. So the next level of the campaigning is both with the trade union reps and the NEC reps and the Shadow Cabinet members to make sure when they turn up at that Clause 5 meeting, they've got the form of words that we want to be in that manifesto itself. And that's absolutely key. Otherwise, all the campaign up until now will be almost purposeless. We've got to get to that stage. That's the first thing. The second thing is I want to put another argument with regard to how we discuss with our comrades the importance of this at this point in time. It's almost inevitable now that we're going to get a Labour government. I go through, and have done for years, all the philosophical arguments about why PR is beneficial, etc. And I agree with all those. But here's a confession really, and I'm brought up a Catholic, so it's a large number of years since my last confession. To be honest, when I'm really down to it, the system I want is a system that I win on. Now that sounds really crude, and when I say win, it's winning in terms of the policies and the principles that I want implemented to change our society, because I'm a socialist. And actually, I believe that the proportional representation system is one in which we will win the battle for those ideas, because I actually do think there's a progressive majority in this country rather than a right-wing majority. And if we can find a system of proportional representation which enables that progressive majority to exercise their vote and their voice, it means basically that we'll have a progressive government permanently within this country. And my worry is this, just very briefly. I've been doing this work. I published a report yesterday about the scale of the problems an incoming Labour government would face, and they're immense. It's most probably the toughest legacy from a Tory government that we'll have post-Second World War, exempting the Attlee government. We'll have, and I think it is true, it is a broken Britain. So actually, we do need 2 terms at least to put that right. And that means I think we'll get elected next time round. I'm almost sure of that now, the way the polls are. But we need to get elected for that 2nd and 3rd term as well. And if we introduced a proportional representation system, I believe we will have a progressive majority that elects a progressive government that will be able to undertake that task, which is one of at least a decade to make up for the 14 years of austerity that we've had under the Tories. And in addition to that, I think we'll enliven our politics, raise the level of debate, exactly as we've said, be more inclusive of that debate as well. But overall, we'll be the transformative governments that we desperately need in this country. So they're my arguments that I want to put forward to the NEC and Shadow Cabinet members that will get round that table for that Clause 5 meeting. So I think we need to take breath today, congratulate everyone, and then go on to the next wave of activity so that we actually seal the deal in that large Clause 5 meeting. Solidarity.
Thank you so much to John. We're really pleased that we've got support from MPs, from PPCs, from trade unionists, from people running organisations, as I said at the beginning, from CLP members from across the country, without whom we would not be where we are. But we also have support from a whole range of other elected representatives of the Labour Party, lots and lots of councillors and mayors. And so I'm really, really pleased that we've now got with us the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Nick Johnson.
Thank you. A lovely warm welcome. I'm here, thank you for the invitation, simply because, like other people have spoken, I am also a convert, but I'm also somebody who has benefited from enlightened voting. For those who don't recall or remember, is that in the mayoral election and indeed the Police and Crime Commission elections, there was a second preference. I would not be standing here as a Labour and cooperative representative for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, the quiet mayor, not Andy, not the other Andy, simply because of the second preference. I would not have won by first past the post. It was because more enlightened people used their second preference to, having come in second place, that I got those extra votes that meant for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, not an area notoriously known for red rabble-rousing, also sort of the home of Lucy Fraser, Steve Barclay, Conservative MPs. But in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough now, at a local level, district council, county council, we now have a much more enlightened and, dare I say it, democratic social viewpoint. We have elected representatives, because when people come up to me now saying, oh, you're the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, they say, it's the first time I've had an opportunity to actually make my Labour vote count. And here he is, about to upstage me. I can't believe that. As I said, I am the quiet man, and I'm sure Andy will put it so much more succinctly. The point is that I came over to the idea of proportional representation not because I was actually the eventual winner in that situation of the second preference, but because, for all the very many people who have already spoken here, for the reason it actually gave proper representation for the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough people. It is right for my community, it is right for the whole of the country, and I hope, with all the hard work that you've done, I will be your, dare I say it, poster boy who got elected because of enlightened representation, and let's move it to full PR. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So some bloke called Andy just came in, but he's going to have to wait a couple of minutes. We have another woman who we all really, really, really want to get elected. She's the PPC for Shrewsbury and Atcham in the West Midlands. She's been extremely patient, and I know you're supposed to be in 17 different places, and probably none of them are here, but we're very, very glad that you've turned up. I'd like you all to welcome, and then please help her get elected, Julia Buckley.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling like a very small fish in a very big pond as I'm sat next to Andy Burnham, so bear with me. I thought really the thing that I could bring to this debate is some real voices from the real world, what this actually means to our voters. And as you can imagine, I'm spending an awful lot of time on the doorstep of the moment. So I brought 3 stories from 3 different doorsteps about what actually this means and the difference that this will make. So my first story is a 50-year-old man who is a taxi driver, and he kept me on the doorstep for quite a long time. And he was quite emphatic in telling me why he doesn't vote anymore and how he won't ever be voting again because it's a waste of his time, because we're all the same, and many other things I can't repeat here, and why his vote will make no difference. So I listened very patiently and I validated everything he had to say, and I promised him that I would bring his message to Labour Party conference and make sure that people heard what he had to say and they understood how he was feeling. He's telling us that the system is broken, and I think we all think he's a little bit right. My second voter is a young 20-year-old woman. We had World Rivers Day. We've got a big river in Shrewsbury, the River Severn. You might have heard of it. You might have heard that the Tories have been pumping it full of sewerage. And our ODS MP, Daniel Kaczynski, you may have heard of him, voted to fill it full of sewerage. So we had a big event, and there were lots of environmental campaigners there, really enthusiastic. And I gave a short speech and got chatting to this young 20-year-old woman. She's a Green voter. She votes Green in the local elections, and she feels really passionately, particularly about this issue. I was so proud to be able to explain to her Labour's policy that within the first 100 days we'll bring in the utility regulation and we'll have really strict rules and fines for those water companies. And I was so proud of it. I was hoping that I was winning her over. And she said to me, "You've left me with a dilemma now, because I'm a member of the Green Party and I vote Green. But what you're telling me, it's a nominal majority of 8,000. You're the best person to get Daniel out. It's most likely you can help us deliver a Labour government. And you're telling me you're going to bring a policy that's going to solve the one big problem I care about. So you've left me with a dilemma. Do I vote with my heart, the party I belong to and what I believe in? Or do I vote tactically for somebody that I think can bring about change?" She's telling us that the system isn't working. She's having to vote tactically to get around our imperfect and unfair system. So I'm on to my last voter now, you'll be pleased to hear. An 82-year-old man in a Lib Dem ward of Shrewsbury Copthorne. He told me quite categorically that he is a regular leafleter and volunteer for the Lib Dems. And as you know, we have to ask everyone in the doorstep, the latest script, what's the thing that matters most to you? What's your big issue? And I have my notebook and my pen ready. He said, PR. And I want to know, what's your view about it? I said, well, I can really reassure you, because I'm a paid-up member of the Labour campaign for electoral reform, and I'm proud of that. And the reason I joined is because my CLP voted unanimously for the motion for PR, and it's my job to represent the majority view. So I'm proud of that. I pay my own money every month to forward those campaigns, and I'm part of a wider caucus. So if I am elected, I'll be a voice pushing that forward. He said, I've changed my mind. I'm going to leaflet for you now, not the Lib Dems. He's already delivered my introductory leaflet in the Lib Dem ward. So I'm not just exploiting octogenarians. And I don't want to tell you that I'm using this because it's a vote winner, but it is a vote winner. People on the doorsteps and in our communities are pleased to hear that we're having these conversations, that it's meaningful, and that we're taking the time to move this forward. They're pleased because it really matters to them. It's not just winning them over to vote Labour, it's winning them over to voting full stop, to getting them engaging in a process which they felt shut out of for so long. Thank you.
Brilliant. I think you set the bar really high, and the next speaker should be quaking. That was brilliant. Can anyone help this woman get elected? Okay, excellent. Sign up afterwards. Thank you for making it here. You can do the selfie first. I know you want a picture with Julia now. We'll get one with everyone. Oh, you're going to put that on your leaflets, aren't you? So our next speaker is also a bit of a convert. I think he's got the zealot of a convert, and that's no bad thing. Some people just get there eventually. We're really glad you're fixing the buses. You've got the best... You've got the best anorak in British politics. But the most important thing about Andy Burnham, I think, is that you have really, really understood with a very interesting perspective, having been in Westminster, just how rotten it is. And the most brilliant of mayors, whether it's Nick in Cambridgeshire or Andy in Manchester or Tracy Brabin in my own little bit of Yorkshire. My colleague, by the way, yesterday said, oh, Andy Burnham, King of the North. I went, you're joking. No, I'm really sorry. We had quite a row, didn't we? I had to point out to you that he could be Prince of the North, but the Queen of the North is going to come from Yorkshire. Anyway, the brilliant thing about Andy is the reflection of a system that he was in and how he really now gets that it doesn't work. And I'm really, really delighted you've come because I know there's lots of pressures on your time, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Laura. Oh, it's amazing to be here, to be honest. Brilliant speech. PR as a vote winner, definitely. That's a good takeaway line. And Nick before you. It's great, honestly, to be part of this tonight. Again, Laura, because you're cheering me up. I had to host the other lot in Manchester last week. Did anybody see anything of what went on? There? We like to pride ourselves as being the home of 24-hour party people. I can assure you, all the ex-staff of 10 Downing Street had a really good week in Manchester because they fitted in very, very well. So much so they trashed the place and trashed the plans that we had as well. And it's that really I wanted to talk about tonight, because I think what you saw there in Manchester last week, when plans that have been developed over years, over a decade, were literally torn up by people in hotel rooms at a party conference, and all the money that had been promised just sort of scattered over the country. Network North, I've nothing against Eddie Plymouth, don't get me wrong, honestly I haven't, but do you think you're part of Network North? I mean, anyway, it just was such a cynical act of politics and a complete disrespect actually to the people of Greater Manchester and the wider North. But the question is, how were they able to do it is the question, isn't it? How do we have a political system that allows that type of behaviour? And the answer to the question is our political system, the combination of first past the post and the whip system in Parliament, the effect of that is to hand huge power to a very small number of elected people, but a large number of unelected people in the civil service. And that is the system that we have. And it allows them to operate in a way that they did without any checks or balances, and basically to ignore the voice of the North, which was unanimous in saying to them, don't do what you're about to do. But that's what they did. And so for me, this points to the need for wholesale root and branch political reform in our country, of which proportional representation is a part. But I think it's really important to say it's not the be-all and end-all, it's a part, it's a very big part, but there's more to it than that. I think we need to keep talking about rewiring the country, making power flow very differently throughout all parts of the UK, and allowing many more people to be involved in the use of that power, and actually allowing places to be more in control of things that are happening in their area, but also as part of that, empowering voters also to hold all politicians to account in a system where every vote counts. That's what we've got to start talking about to stop what we saw happen in Manchester last week. But you could see an example of it in this city. Laura said that, I went through experiences in government that kind of did get me on that road to Damascus, and it did. My experience of trying to raise certain issues, but Hillsborough was chief amongst them. Again, I come back to it. How could a situation like that have stood for so long? How could an entire English city have been crying injustice for 20 years with no one in that Whitehall, Westminster system listening? I mean, how could that happen? Particularly when the people here were right and they were wrong. But you could actually look at other issues where there is a major injustice. You could also ask the question, how could the contaminated blood scandal last for 5 decades and still last, because we await the public inquiry? How did that happen? How did I get given letters as Secretary of State for Health that contained lines that were untrue, that I sent to campaigners? And I only found out afterwards because of the work I did after I'd left the Department for Health, that the claim that no one was ever knowingly given an unsafe blood product. Well, that just simply wasn't true. So how can we have a system that operates in this way, so clearly and kind of obviously against the public interest, and basically denying the people of this country the justice that they deserved? As I said, for me, it's the combination of things that make the problem. I actually think if you look at the British political system, and particularly if you look at Parliament, it actually has, in many ways, the foundations of the feudal system from which it evolved. The House of Lords, definitely, because obviously there are people still in there who were given land by some monarch or other in some century, and they're still in there making your laws, making our laws. How does that come about? But I think first past the post has something of the rotten borough system about it, where some places have got more power than others because of the electoral maths. And some places then matter more than others when it comes to spending decisions. We've definitely seen that in this Parliament, where seats that are deemed to be more important to the governing party get showered with things. And that was part of that Network North nonsense. They were getting preferential treatment and not the big infrastructure that the country needs. So I think the kind of Commons has grown from that. And personally, I think the system that we've got in the Commons with first past the post is almost like it's like a veneer of democracy whilst giving away as little power as you possibly can. Because as I say, the whip system turns MPs often into just sort of what they call lobby fodder, or people just have to rubber stamp the positions of the Whitehall government departments. That's why the contaminated blood scandal can stand so long, because MPs are not individually empowered to change those things. You have to really go out and stick your neck out if you're going to try and challenge the system and change an injustice. And that's why the system concentrates power in a very small number of hands, in one postcode, and inordinate power over this country. The north-south divide is no accident. The north-south divide is a product of national policy, because what you have is often quite London-centric attitudes within that system, making all of the decisions, and that then has the effect, obviously, of creating the huge inequality that we've seen. Look at what they did last week. They think they can treat us as second-class citizens in the north of England when it comes to transport. That's the prevailing attitude. But the system allows them to treat us as second-class citizens, and that's the problem that needs fixing. So from my purposes, I think this is kind of a bigger thing about rewiring the country. I personally would start with a written constitution based on the model that you have in Germany. And bear in mind, Britain had a kind of hand in creating that kind of modern political system in Germany after the Second World War. The German constitution, written constitution, which I think is important because that spells out where power lies and who has power and how it's used, that constitution has a basic law which requires an equivalence of living standards between the 16 Länder of Germany. Imagine if we had such a constitution where there was a requirement for an equivalence of living standards across the English regions, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. This would be a very different country to the one it currently is. So that would be one of my requirements. Secondly, I would want to see, obviously, an elected Senate of the nations and regions. How can it be that every region and nation is not equally represented in our national parliament? As I understand it, there are more people who went to Eton in the House of Lords than were born in the northwest of England. I mean, when are we going to get angrier about this and demand the change that we need to see? So constitutional change, Senate of the nations and regions to replace the Lords, maximum devolution out of Parliament to allow more to be done at the level that it can be done. And that's how you can put the buses back under public control, because power was taken out of that system. And we've got to ask ourselves a question. In the time we were in government, we didn't turn that around, did we? It's only been devolution that's turned, think about this. At a time when we've not been in government nationally, Labour has managed to overturn a key Thatcher reform of the 1980s, bus deregulation. Think about that. For anybody who's been a sceptic about English devolution, I think you've got your proof right there, that this can change things. And this is worth backing. And imagine what it could do with a Labour government. So more devolution. But then you get on to the Commons. And in my view, you do have to have fundamental change there. Reform of the voting system to have a proportional system, so that, in my experience, the voice of the regions actually can be heard much more clearly in that chamber than it normally is. And I would personally remove the whip system. Why would I do that? Because I think it would elevate the status of members of Parliament if they were able to act with greater agency and with more independence and kind of take decisions that might be in the interest of their region and work with other MPs from other parties sometimes in the interests of their region. I think it would lift the esteem of politics in the eyes of the British public if MPs were operating more like that rather than on this kind of strict party first rule with the whip and all the rest of it. I actually think that demeans politics. I would have a very different approach where the primary chamber is empowered, and it is like Reformed Lords, a place where every place is truly equal. And this is my finishing point. You know, you can't get to what I'm describing until we get to a voting system where every vote is equal and every vote counts the same. Because it's only when every vote counts the same that every person will count the same and every place will count the same. That is why that is also a fundamental part of the rewiring that Britain needs. So you will have seen some of my political journey over the years, and yeah, it's been a winding one at times. But I've arrived at a really clear point. You know, I'm passionate about this kind of region that you are in, the northwest of England, but I know it can never be what I want it to be for as long as the current political system stays in place. We've got to wake up, in some ways like Scotland did a number of years ago, to say this is what is holding us back. A system that entrenches power in one place, in too few hands, with all of those London-centric attitudes and London-centric policy. That is what is creating our problem. And we saw a graphic illustration of it last week. So we can only live in a more equal country when we change that political system to ensure that all people and all places are truly equal. That's why I hope, as well as supporting PR, you will support the call for the wider rewiring of the country. And let's not get to the kind of mindset where Labour always says, but it's not really important, this. You know, we'll come back to it in a third term or so. It is important. Until you change this, you don't get the transport system that people here need. You don't get the homes built that people here need. You don't get the economy that people here need, and you don't close the inequality between north and south. That you have to rewire the country to change the country. That's why I hope you'll support what I've been saying. Thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll hand back to Laura.
So that was a call to arms. We're now going to be Labour for a new wiring. I think we can do it. We've got this far. It's so interesting to hear Andy talking about the regions. I'm really, really grateful that we have an MP with us from a country in a place where we actually have PR, which was actually introduced by the Labour Party. Thank you, Beth, for being here and being so patient, and for giving up Wales Night to be with us. It's our MP from the Cynon Valley, Beth Winter.
Diolch yn fawr. Yeah, I'm Beth from MP for Cynon Valley in South Wales. I've always been a proponent of proportional representation, and it is, as others have already said, about equality. Every vote should count. And it's also about enfranchisement, because people are not voting in the numbers that they should be voting. And I think this is will assist in the lack of voting, really, that is extremely worrying at the moment in the UK. Now, in many regards, I've got an easy job, because in Wales we've had PR for 25 years. Nothing major has gone wrong. It's actually been very beneficial. It's enabled Welsh Government to enter into a coalition agreement currently with Plaid Cymru, and it has enabled Welsh Government to introduce more progressive policies, or assisted Welsh Government in doing that. Universal free school meals, the UBI pilot, Ynni Cymru, which is a Welsh publicly owned energy company. So we're already doing it in Wales, and we're doing it as well as we can. And I suppose the second point, and I will keep it very brief because it's very much along the lines that Andy just spoke. Unless we have a total overhaul of the current political system, PR in itself is not going to achieve the change that advocates of PR want. So in Wales, we are currently experiencing, as the North probably is as well, a re-centralising of power in Westminster. And UK government is riding roughshod over our democratically elected government in Wales. Levelling up is an obvious example. They're going straight to local authorities rather than even consulting with Welsh Government. And Welsh Government want to continue to introduce progressive policies, tackle the still high levels of poverty and inequality that exist in Wales, despite what Welsh Government are doing, but they are being increasingly constrained by the current authoritarian and centralised political system in this country. So we need fundamental constitutional change in the UK. We need to get rid of the House of Lords. We need, I agree, elected Senate of the regions and nations. We need to stop, which the Welsh Government has done, the worst elements, or more so, of the Election Act that was introduced, which is disenfranchising millions of people. We need fundamental change. And in Wales, we're undertaking a constitutional commission. Gordon Brown has come out with some good proposals. So we're looking at a federalist approach, which again would affect the northern region. So, you know, I think we're singing from a similar hymn sheet. But unless that fundamental change, and for me, it's not just a redistribution of power. It has to be accompanied by a redistribution of wealth. Because unless the money and the economy is decentralised to as local a level as possible, any power is quite meaningless. And we're experiencing constraints on that front in Wales as well. We're underfunded by over £1 billion as a result of austerity. So as much as we want to renationalise the bus service in Wales, and I know the Lee Waters is looking to Andy and others to do those sorts of things, we are on our knees financially in Wales because the money, the purse strings remain in Westminster. So power must go hand in hand with economic devolution and significant redistribution of wealth. Finally then, going back to PR, I think it was a historic achievement last year. And as John mentioned, it is now about turning, the achievements into practice and ensure that the next Labour government does take forward PR and implement it at a UK level. So diolch yn fawr. Good luck.
So it was a historic achievement last year at conference. Oh, there's a group of people got to be somewhere else. Thank you for coming. We're still going to vote for you, but not you. Oh, it's the walk of shame. So it was a historic achievement last year, but we also made a massive, massive step forward this year with the work of the National Policy Forum, and that was done because we had a number of really committed National Policy Forum reps who gave their time, which was under great pressure. They joined the meetings that we organised, and then they really stuck to their guns in the discussions. And one of them was Hannah Rich, who is a Socialist Society rep on the National Policy Forum, and we're really, really grateful for the work you did, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks to those... Thanks, Laura, and thanks to those of you who've had the grace to pretend you were here to hear all of us, not just Andy. But a particular thank you to Alex and the team who led us through the MPF process. We had colour-coded briefings, we had folders of notes, we had Zoom meetings, we had the best prep that we could have wanted. And it's because of them and because of all of you that we managed to get the MPF document that says historically that the flaws in the current voting system are contributing to the distrust and the alienation we see in politics. We know it's historic, we know it's a massive achievement. We know that without naming names, there are people in this room who've been fighting for this longer than I've been alive. But a particular shout out to the Socialist Societies. We know that the CLPs came on this 2 years ago. The unions got on board with the vote last year. And I know the unions in affiliate terms are the big guns, but some of us, the Socialist Societies, were there 2 years ago. I was a delegate for Christians on the Left then, and we were among the 5% of affiliates that voted for that motion with the CLPs 2 years ago. So we've been there for slightly longer than it was trendy. Not as long as some of you, but I don't think it was that trendy 2 years ago. Maybe it was. It's incredible, the change in just 12 months that the unions came on board, and then in the last 12 months, the change of getting it through the MPF. And we know that the problems we face as a country are massive. But if we're honest, they are bigger than one party, one manifesto, or one platform. However much we believe in Labour and our potential to transform this country, the distrust and the alienation go far further than that, and that's why it's really important that it's recognised in the MPF. But don't let anybody tell you that voters don't want electoral reform, that they don't care about it, that housing and welfare and immigration and the cost of living come up on the doorstep more often than the intricacies of proportional representation. It doesn't have to be either or. We've all knocked doors, haven't we, and spoken to people who don't bother voting because they think their vote doesn't count. And if we're honest, the best economic or social or housing or bus policy in the world won't cut it for many of them until we can convince them that their vote matters. And there's a way to do that, and that is proportional representation. That is electoral reform. That's why we are here. We're here for a Labour government, after all, and the work that we're doing to ensure that people and communities across the country trust us as a party is great, but it's not enough if they don't trust politics at large. We need reform so that everyone feels that their vote counts, and not just that they feel it, but that they know that there's a system under which their voice counts, that's designed for that purpose, designed that they do count, not designed to shut their voice out or to narrow down the number of people whose votes count. So that's a work and a legacy that will go far beyond the next Labour government or the next or the next or the next. It's what we have to do, it's what we will do, and it's what we're here to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thanks again for all of the work. We've got another couple of our prospective parliamentary candidates. You're going to get sick of these people because hopefully we're going to get them elected, then they're going to be on the telly. You're going to fight between you for who goes first? Excellent, good start. Louise. Louise Jones, if you followed, as many of us did, the start of the conflict in Ukraine, you may have seen Louise commenting on Sky. She's had a really interesting career working in defence and military. She has a very high-powered and incredibly complicated job, but we're going to demote all of that when she becomes the MP, hopefully for North East Derbyshire, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's really great to be stood here. I remember from conference last year how much work as a delegate we were all putting into getting the motion passed, and so it was fantastic when it did. And it's great to be here a year on, standing here as a PPC and still making the case for change, because we do need it. And, you know, as has been said, I was in the military for about 7 years, which included deploying to Afghanistan. And the decisions, when you're in the military, you know, selfless commitment is very important, and it's something that you sign up to. But the decisions that the government of the day makes can have a very big impact on the risks to what you do end up doing in your life. And I found it very ironic that even as I deployed to Afghanistan, because I lived in a safe seat, that effectively I had no say in the government of the day, how it was chosen, who it was, and the decisions that they were going to make. And I think it's been really interesting now that we've had the pandemic and we've seen doctors and nurses and healthcare workers went through an incredibly dangerous time working all hours to help us during that pandemic, and they face sizable risks as well. And we went through all of these challenges and we saw all of these, and I really do think that there is an equivalence with where we were in 1945, where as a country we all worked very hard for this state. Many things were asked of us. I know that many people made sacrifices. They weren't able to see loved ones. They weren't able to say goodbye to loved ones. I think we've all got a personal story to tell. And I think we're in a similar position now where we made many sacrifices for the state, but we want to know, what is the state going to do for us back? And as in 1945, where Labour stood there and said, yes, we know the sacrifices that you have made, and we know you're looking for a renewal of the contract between citizens and the government, that we're going to bring in big reforms like the NHS. And I know that we're in a similar position here, and I know that Labour is looking very closely at things like reforming the House of Lords, to giving more powers to local councils and to mayors. We know that the case for change is there. We're all hearing apathy on the doorsteps, but our work is not done. Our work is not finished if we look at the House of Lords and we look at local councils and we don't look at the way the House of Commons is selected as well. So this is really my last point. What I want to make here is that for those whose lives are so affected by the government, their vote needs to count equally and have their say in the decisions that the government has made. And I think the case is self-evident that we need to bring in proportional representation as a Labour government, or our job is simply not done. Thank you. I will come and find you.
No pressure, Jeevan Sander, PPC for Loughborough. We're really, really delighted that you've joined us. The PPCs have all had that. Yes, you can sneak off, Andy. They've all had their marching orders, where they've got to be, what they've got to say, how many receptions they need to be at. And thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, so the time of our prospective parliamentary candidates is really, really under pressure. And so we are really very glad that you've joined us. And give us a good speech and we'll come and canvass in Loughborough.
Thank you very much. Well, friends, it's wonderful to be here. Guys, first of all, are we having a good conference? Yeah. Let's do it. Are we having a good conference? Yeah. Are we having a good conference? It's so exciting to be here, at a point where we could, of course, win the next general election a year away, probably. It's so exciting to be on the threshold of power and indeed to see how far we've come. But first of all, can I say, Louise got selected last week, so a massive round of applause for Louise. She's going to be a brilliant MP, an absolute asset to our party, and indeed what we represent now going forward. I think today what I want to say to you all simply, friends, is actually very, very simple. I want to say thank you. Thank you to every person in this room who has worked to show the flaws in our electoral system. Thank you for those who keep convincing others to reform our electoral system. And thank you, of course, for the work you continue to do going forward. We have known, of course, that our electoral system has not been working, that it's contributed to the distrust and alienation we see in politics today. And of course, we now know our movement agrees with that. Over 80% of Labour members, 2/3 of trade unions and most CLPs and conference, of course, from last year believes that we need change. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done in here. And we know that's true because we have, of course, an electoral system that doesn't count our votes equally, but also one that gave us more prime ministers last year than we had onshore wind farms built in this country. That's not quite strong and stable, I don't think. It is important how we elect our leaders. The rules of the game do matter. And that's why we are here. So friends, I want to say thank you so much again for everything that you've done, for everything that you continue to do. But of course, I do want to leave you with this. Irrespective of where we sit today, what we think about the electoral system today, the next election will be under first past the post. We do have to go and win. So yes, do come to Loughborough. And do go to North East Derbyshire, go to every single marginal constituency, because we don't achieve change if we don't win. Friends, let's go do it. Thank you very much. Have a great conference.
That was brilliant, but next time you come and do that pantomime thing, you're in trouble, because that's my job. Thank you so much to both of you. Good luck, wherever you're going now. Many people have mentioned the trade unions, and we would not be where we are without the trade unions at a kind of strategic level, but without a really key number of very, very committed individuals who have been talking to their colleagues, who helped us make those historic wins in terms of shifting policy last year. So I'm going to introduce a couple of brilliant women who have been very patiently sitting on the front row from two unions who have made a massive, massive difference. The first is Unison. The union that represents many of the people who really, really were on the front line during the whole of COVID. Unison has got brilliant policy in favour of proportional representation. There are many people that sit behind that shift in policy, but one of them is very, very definitely Aileen, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Unison's got 1.3 million members, and 1 million of those are women, and I think it was a really important place to get us over the line with support for PR. I kind of was a bit of a blow-in and in the right place at the right time, and got to speak on the conference motion that was passed, and it was just a fantastic thing to be able to do. But I mean, like in all of the other sectors, there are so many people who have been working on this for years and years, from somebody I know called Stephen in Lanarkshire right down to Neil Guild in the southwest, who've been making these arguments for years. It's great that we are now in that position, because I think it did have an impact on the change in vote, along with the other unions that came on board over that year. But we really can't be complacent in the unions, and what I'm finding in Unison is that if you have the conversation with people, it's actually there's a lot of support, as there was at the National Delegate Conference. If you can speak to people and have those conversations, the support is there. But in a lot of big meetings, you do face that argument. It's not the right time. How can we talk to our members about this when there's a cost of living crisis, or there's a climate crisis, or equal pay hasn't been won yet, or all of the real bread and butter issues? And I just really think any of you who are in unions at the moment, we really need, on a really on the ground level, to keep these conversations alive. And for me, the things with the unions, all these issues are mega important, but the things that I try to focus on with them are, okay, we're probably going to get a Labour government that's going to turn around some things like the trade union, the punishing trade union legislation that we've been left with after the Tories. But if we don't introduce a stable electoral system, we're going to be back to the situation we were in with the last Labour government, where we got Sure Start, we got lots of other great things, but then the Tories come in and they just wreck everything that we've achieved, or a lot of what we've achieved. And we know from the last 100 years that, I mean, even David Evans said it today on the conference floor, that we've only been, since the last Keir, we've only actually been in power for 30 years. So we all want Labour values and Labour policies and a better Britain. But if we want to keep it, we need electoral reform. And I think that's an argument that can work. And the other argument is democracy is a word you hear so much in Unison. It's a real core value of Unison and all of the other unions. And how can you really, truly, fundamentally believe in democracy when we have a voting system where people don't count, people's votes don't count equally, and people feel so disillusioned by politics? But we do have that we do have that fundamental statement in the policy document now. We can build on that. In the Labour Party, we can build on that within our trade unions. But the other argument that's really, really common that comes up in unison, at least, is the fear of the far right. I think the Tories and the experience of the last few years have made that a much easier argument to counter. But I think we do need to be armed with arguments for PR, and we need to take every tiny opportunity. Like I was just at breakfast with somebody today who's in the Labour Party who is a real supporter of first past the post. I just sat and ate breakfast with the guy, but and they're in unison. And, we had a really interesting, an interesting conversation, and I like to think I've sent him away with a few things to think about. And I just think that all of us in this room have to be doing that all the time in our unions and our workplaces, so that we keep this debate alive, and we keep the unions on board, and we win the argument.
Yeah, and if not, we put something in the cereals. So thank you so much. We've got lots of people from unions. Danny, every year you're very patient, and every year you then gracefully concede because we run over time. But I do want to mention the Fire Brigades Union because you've been absolutely brilliant. And thank you also to your General Secretary, Matt Rack, who also spoke really, really passionately and defended the case for PR during the National Policy Forum discussion. So we are really grateful, and please say hi to the FBU from all of us. Thank you, Danny. Our next speaker is from another union which flipped this year. We were really, really pleased that we have the support of USDOR. They're a huge union. Their members represent people who are also on the front line of COVID across the country. Thank you so much, Linda Burns, for joining us this evening.
Just speaking to you. Hi, I don't like these lights. This is my first time at conference. Yay! I was a newly elected councillor in May. And we now have a Labour majority in Erewash. First time in 20 years, yeah. With quite a few new councillors on board as well. I'm also an USDOR member. At conference in April, which I nearly didn't go to because it was so close to election, I went up and supported PR. I still support PR. I do believe it's the way to go. We need a fairer system, and please just keep supporting it. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I'm sure there's lots of other people to speak. Okay, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, the lights are a little off-putting. I'm sorry about that. Our next speaker was one of the youth reps. He's from this region. Max Szykalski was a youth rep in the National Policy Forum process and was one of the other people making the argument and who helped us win the case for PR. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I will keep it brief because I've been asked to do so. Together with Hannah and Liz, sorry, forgot your name for a second, and a few other brilliant NPF reps, we went to Nottingham and we had pretty much a weekend full of discussions with MPs, with Shadow Cabinet, with other NPF rep members, and we did manage to get this monumental change in the party's stance on PR and first past the post. And it was great, but we do need to actually get PR as well. The Tories have been ruining the country for the past 13 years. Sorry, my voice is breaking. And they are not doing this alone. They are using first past the post to abuse the demographics and the geography of this country to keep maintaining majorities. Out of the last 20 elections, out of the last 20 general elections, left-wing parties received majority of the vote in 19 of them. And they've only been in power for the third of that time. So it just makes no sense to say that proportional representation will keep Labour out of power. It will keep us in power, and it'll give us the time to fix the country after 13 years of austerity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next speaker set up an organisation which is really taking on some of the harshest, most disgusting policies really that this government is coming out with. People who are really often on the front line, denigrated in the press, denied services, and many of them, all of them, denied the right to vote. So I'm really delighted that we've got Lara Parizzotto here from the Migrant Democracy Project. She and her co-partner in crime, Alexander Bullitt, who's a councillor, a very, very big support. Oh, you're there on the step. A big support of the PR campaign, and we've got 2 for the price of 1. We're really pleased that you've both turned up this evening, so thank you, Lara.
I love the pronunciation as well. No one ever gets it right. Hi everyone, my name is Lara Parizzotto. I'm a councillor in Hounslow and a co-director of Migrant Democracy Project with Alex. And whatever hat I'm wearing, I'm literally only talking about democracy and voter registration 24/7, every day of the week. Every weekend I'm out at a festival doing voter registration, getting migrants who are eligible to vote to use their vote. Go to the Polish festival, South Asian Mela, Brazilian festival, always talking, please register to vote, please use your vote. And I can do a really good speech about why they should register to vote and why they should vote. They're sending their kids to the same schools that everyone else is. They're using the buses. They need housing. They access the public services. And also, if you haven't noticed, the government is treating migrants really poorly right now. The narrative is cruel. The policies are even more cruel. And of course, they can, because migrants rarely have that power to vote. And I want them to have that power. I want them to be able to leverage that power and say, I want better policies for myself, for my community. But nonetheless, I'm still out there telling them, please register to vote, please use your vote, it does matter. But sometimes I go back home and I feel a bit bad for myself. Am I lying to my own members of my own community that their vote matters? Because in reality, I'm often doing these voter registration sessions in metropolitan areas where the truth is that their vote might not matter. And I want to change that for our own sake, for the sake of better immigration policies. So with Alex, we've been campaigning so hard for something called residence-based voting rights, which is already in place in Scotland and Wales, and we want to bring it to England and Northern Ireland as well. But it doesn't stop there, or I guess before we get there, we need proportional representation to get those voices, to get those policies in place so that everyone will have a meaningful vote in the UK, in their home, where they live, where they work, where they pay the council tax. And just on another note, I didn't know that I was going to be talking about this until yesterday. I was at the Green Party conference. I also went to the Lib Dems and the Conservative for work, so please don't expel me. And they passed a motion to basically stand a candidate in every seat for the next general election. And I was in the room and I was texting Alex quite a lot that the conversation there was wild, because they basically decided to do this because they don't believe that the Labour Party will do PR anymore. They don't believe that reciprocity, that good faith argument is going to stay, and that's just going to be harmful to all progressive movements, as we've seen in Uxbridge. So it is more than time for us to commit fully to this, so that we can win progressive seats and that we can keep winning those good policies that members of my community need, all of us need, and finally get a progressive government for ourselves. So thank you very much.
So we waited a long time for PR, and I think some of you may feel we're waiting a long time for this meeting as well. But there is a prize, and I really want to thank our next speaker a lot. They're a representative of Socialist Society, and when the votes were happening at conference last year, you'll have noticed, the nerds amongst you, if you look through the details of the Socialist Societies that voted for PR, that Labour Business was on the list, and they didn't really have a policy. And there's a reason why Labour Business was on the list, and that's because somebody just thought it was the right thing to do. So I'd like to give a really big shout out and a massive thanks to our next speaker, Liz Hind.
Yeah, thank you for that. If you want to find people who the political system doesn't work for, go and speak to your local business owner, go and speak to your pub landlady, go speak to your hairdresser, go speak to your carpenters and your small business owners, because we get forgotten far too often. And I've spent all afternoon talking to small business owners at the SME Sunday Day. And what are we talking about? We are talking about where is our representation on industrial councils? Because the vast majority of business owners are small business owners. And it's not just business owners, SMEs also employ 60% of people in the private sector. But we get overlooked far too often because we can't pay for the lobbyists to get into that Westminster system and to get our voices heard. And it matters. When I was running a pub, which I did during COVID, we were fighting for our staff and paying for our staff and looking after them. My grant money was going straight out to my landlord and overseas into the Cayman Islands. That's where most of that pub grant money went. So, it's wrong to think that businesses can't be progressive, because we are, if you speak to the right businesses. And Labour Business, our campaigns at the moment, we're looking at corporate governance reform. There are a lot of businesses out there that are saying, I don't want to be beholden to stakeholders, I want to work with my communities. But we need that reform, which Labour Business is working for. And then tomorrow I will be speaking on a panel about supply chain regulations and due diligence on supply chains, because we can't export human rights abuses overseas and pretend we can't see them when we go and buy a bar of chocolate. We need a government that works. And, I'm here from Labour Business. I was a pub landlady, and because of Labour Party democratic procedures, I got to write bits of the National Policy Forum report. There's whole bits that I wrote because we have a voting system and a system that works, and pub landladies get to write business policy. So thank you very much.
So I'm aware of the fact that there's a couple of people waiting to speak, and thank you for your patience. I really would like to invite Naomi to join us. Naomi's the General Secretary of the Musicians' Union. There are many organisations that have helped us organise today. We're grateful, as always, to the Electoral Reform Society, to the Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform, to ASLEF, but also to the Musicians' Union for your backing in every sense, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very pleased to support tonight's event. Our executive committee's recently reaffirmed its support for proportional representation. And basically, I think proportional representation is better representation. And I know, as General Secretary of a trade union, that I'm very proud to have a mandate from our members. It's a really clear mandate. Every member gets to vote on who is going to be the General Secretary, and the person with the most votes goes ahead to represent the members. And that gives me surety that I can speak on behalf of our members. But we're a broad church. A trade union has many members. Our members exist across the whole political spectrum. And it's my duty to listen to all of our members and try and represent all of our members as best I can. And I think the government should do that too. I don't think we should be complacent if we're voted through and we actually are in government. I think we need to still look at the electoral system, and we need to make sure it works for every voter. As others have said, it's so common to speak to somebody who says that they don't feel that their vote counts, and that just shouldn't be the case. The Tories don't really care about democracy. We know, because our conference here is extremely democratic, and anyone who wants to have a say can have a say. But if you go to Conservative Party conference, there is no democratic aspect. People don't really spend much time in the hall because they're not voting, because they don't believe in that. But we do. We've got to be the party that makes sure that every voice is heard. So I feel strongly about it. Our union feels strongly about it. 2/3 of Labour-affiliated unions now support it. So let's go ahead, get into government and make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, our penultimate speaker is a member of the Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform Board, maybe is still a supporter of PR, is still a member of the Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform, is also a councillor in Oxfordshire County Council. I'm really pleased that we've got Duncan Enright.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So, Mayor of Manchester told you why First Past the Post doesn't work for the north of England. I'm here as the first Labour and Cooperative Mayor of Witney, to say why it doesn't work for the south of England. And the reason it doesn't work is because under first past the post, we have to work with people who manipulate the system. And you'll know that I'm talking about Liberal Democrats. Are they a progressive party? Are they not a progressive party? They haven't decided. Until last week, I was in coalition in the cabinet on Oxfordshire County Council with Liberal Democrats, and they couldn't decide. And we need to force them to become a proper party with values and policies that back those values up, like we are. Then they can call themselves progressive. At the moment, they just play first past the post by saying, we're like the Tories, only a bit more yellow. We're like Labour, only we're not quite so, I don't know what, democratic. They are playing the system, and they need to nail their colours to the mast. And one of the major benefits of electoral reform and proportional representation will be that it will force parties to mean what they say and say what they mean, and that includes the Liberal Democrats. So vote for PR, I say, in order to make people stand up and represent the people that they purport to represent. Thank you.
Well, we nearly got there. We nearly had a whole fringe without tribal Labour. But anyway, I guess every fringe needs a dollop of it. Thank you to you all very, very much. Our final speaker gave up Scotland night to be here, so we all owe him a drink. But before we invite him to the stage, I would just like to really reiterate thanks from the team of Labour for New Democracy to all of the members of our coalition. Please stay in touch. There's a lot still for us to do. I think Andy Burnham gave us a very, very long list of homework. So we're going to go write a constitution, sort out the House of Lords, and think about various other things. But mostly, we're going to carry on the fight for proportional representation. We will have a little break after conference, and then we're going to do an update. Please, please join, if you're not a member, the Labour campaign for electoral reform. It's really, really important that everyone is a member of LCR. And on Tuesday evening, Sandy and the team from LCR, along with Land, will be hosting drinks at Kane's Brewery. Thank you, Sandy, for sitting on the step all night. So please come along on Tuesday evening. You're all very, very welcome to join us. Get in touch with the campaign by email. And thank you, Linda. Please also come along to the fringes that are happening over the next few days. Electoral Reform Society, there's some interesting discussion going to be happening with IPPR. Labour Together have got a session on winning the election. So there's plenty for you to sink your teeth into, opportunities for you to raise issues about electoral reform. And now, finally, I would really like to invite, I'd like to thank and invite an absolutely brilliant and inspiring speaker who was a stalwart supporter of the campaign as an MP and still remains a supporter as an MSP. Some of you will have heard him yesterday evening in a drag club somewhere outside. This is a slightly different setting, but he'll be brilliant, I'm sure, again. Thank you very much to Paul Sweeney, and when Paul has finished, we're going to see you in the bar.
So I realise I'm the only thing between you and a pint, so I'll keep it quick. But I just want to reflect on the fact that it's been such a successful year. Who'd have thought even 5 years ago that we would have had the breakthrough in changing our party's policy on this, because it's felt like such an uphill struggle. Credit to everyone in our movement who came together and worked so hard and so methodically and carefully to get this breakthrough, and we can really relish that success, but we need to keep up the fight. And it's not just about nerds talking about psephology and electoral systems and single transferable votes and alternative votes and all the other permutations of what might be loosely defined as proportional representation, but it's about the very nature of our political system. There's a fundamental poison at the heart of our democracy, and it is first past the post and the behaviours, the toxic behaviours that it introduces into our system of discussion and discourse in our political life. And it has rendered the fabric of our country so horrendously. We talked about this from various speakers tonight. We heard about the vandalism of big infrastructure projects like HS2 being trashed because of narrow political calculations by Tories trying to salvage votes in marginal seats. We've heard about the toxic hostile environment policies that the Tories pursue in the hope of pandering to very narrow interests in these marginal constituencies. It's disgraceful, it's disgusting, it is against our national interest, it is largely against the will of the British people, and we know that in every general election Since the Second World War, a majority of the British people go out and cast their votes at general elections for largely centre-left parties, but for 2/3 of the time have been governed by Tory majority government. It's not sustainable, it can't continue, and it produces a deep alienation and disengagement from our politics. We know that in so many constituencies, people don't even bother to engage because they know it doesn't make a difference. And they're right to do that. It's a rational decision. But we have to liberate them from that situation. We have to engage with that and offer a way forward, a hope that Britain can get its future back. The theme of this conference, first past the post, is against the interests of the British people. It's an electoral system that denies the will of the British people. We need to be the party that does the great unfinished business of British constitutional reform. We know in the 123 years of this party's existence that everything that is good about this country has been delivered by Labour governments. We heard a lot of that tonight. But I often think, what have we missed as a country, as a society, as a generation after generation of what we could have had in those years where we could have had Labour governments. We could have had Labour policy entrenched. We could have avoided the economic and social vandalism of these Conservatives. We could have done so much more. We only had 30 precious years. Think about a century ago, the first council houses built under Labour government. Angela Rayner spoke very powerfully about that today and the impact it had on social mobility. Of course, the creation of the welfare state under the 1945 Labour government, the National Health Service, the social security system, the two big pillars of our post-war society. The social reforms of the 1960s and, of course, the huge public investments of the 1990s. Precious windows of opportunity and progress for our country, our society. We could have had so much more. And also, it is about the very nature of our country holding together. We know that, like, in 1917, this was seen as the obvious thing to do. The single transferable vote was invented in Britain. It's actually a system that, through colonial rule, Britain imposed on other countries in the process of decolonisation. It was, I think, the Speakers' Conference agreed was going to be introduced more than a century ago. It didn't happen because of a complete logjam between the unelected Lords and the Commons about deciding which system could go ahead. We actually had a brief spell of having single transferable vote under the university constituencies up until the 1950s. You know, we've had tantalising glimpses of what we could have delivered in Britain, but we didn't get there. We need to finish this great unfinished work by ensuring that the next Labour government goes ahead and delivers a proportional system. And this is the last general election that we will fight under this horrific first past the post system. And I'll tell you why it's such a critical thing. We heard tonight some of the issues where people have died as a result of the miscalculations of governments pursuing narrow sectional interests. I'll give one example. I've been trying as an MP, now as an MP, as an MP and now as an MSP, to introduce overdose prevention facilities in my city of Glasgow because we're losing someone in Scotland every 8 hours to a preventable drug-related death. We know in over 16 countries around the world these work and they help save lives. There's a consensus in Scotland to do it, every party backs it. The Scottish Parliament wants to do it, the City Council wants to do it, the public are backing it. Why are we being denied by a almost vice-regal representative in the Home Secretary? Has no interest in the public will and goodwill of Glasgow. They have no interest in improving public health. They're interested in pandering to a right-wing Tory agenda, a sectarian, bigoted agenda that they think will garner votes in marginal constituencies, which are largely unaffected by this problem. So Glaswegians die. Glaswegians are dying on a daily basis because of that. That's what's happened. We've finally got a breakthrough in having a pilot project in Glasgow, but in the 7 years it's taken to get from the first proposal to this breakthrough in the pilot, over 7,000 Scots have died. It's a shocking indictment of what's going on in this country. We can talk more about the austerity of the last decade, the staggering life expectancy in this country, the huge missed opportunities that a whole generation that are going to be poorer than the previous one have had to endure, including my own generation, the huge alienation that's produced. Do you wonder why people in Scotland then turn around and say, let's get out of the UK altogether? This system doesn't work for us. We have to have something to say to people in Scotland. We have to tell them that there is a better way forward for this country, that there is a possibility of repairing the British Constitution, that it's possible to say to them that it's not just Scotland that gets Tory governments imposed on them against their will, it's the whole of the British people who get Tory governments imposed on them against their will. That is the way forward for this country. Labour has to have a profound and credible response to that challenge. We've got a breakthrough in Scotland, a precious opportunity. We saw that fantastic by-election result on Thursday. We can't squander that interest that the Scottish people are now expressing in Labour again. We can't let them down. We have to have a response in government. We have to ensure that if we get into government next year, we move towards the Scottish Parliament elections in 2026 with a proposal that uplifts people, that gives them this idea that we're moving forward again as a country, and that they have a stake in the British political system. Otherwise, we risk breaking up the UK. We could win the battle of the general election next year and lose the war to preserve our country and build a new Britain. That is why we need to understand the true stakes of this. It's not just nerds in a room talking about electoral systems. It's the very political culture we have to deal with. It's everything at stake, including people's lives. That's why this is so important. That's why you should go out from here motivated to continue this discussion, motivated to have this at the heart of our manifesto, and understand how we link that discussion about process to everything in our political system, because it drives behaviours, whether it's destroying critical infrastructure projects to key public health interventions that save people's lives. That's why it's so important. So go out there and let's win this progress for our country, because everyone's at stake. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry, because I've seen brilliant Sam Tarry and the amazing and still here Mary Southcott, and now David has arrived, and you're all still here, and I'm very grateful. But Caroline has been sending me, we gotta get out of the room signals. Otherwise they're gonna charge us. And we want your money for PR and not for the conference centre. So thank you so much.